Welcome back to the fall edition of the 4D PNR NMRA layout tours. My name is Lee Marsh. I'm a co-chair of the layout tour group with Burr Stewart. Today we would like to welcome Mike Davis from the great state of Maryland, a Santa Fe modeler modeling San Bernardino to Summit and Cahon Pass in 1950. Very interesting prototypical structures, and his layout is under construction, so you will also get to see some of the bones of how the layout is constructed. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Mike. Welcome, Mike. Take it away.
As they said, I'm modeling from San Bernardino, the San Bernardino B yard, which would connect with Bill Messacar's layout, actually, to Summit. I got into this because I lived by the tracks in Southern California when I was 2 years old, and I think the Santa Fe imprinted on me because although I got an American Flyer layout for Christmas when I was 4 years old, when I got to choose what I wanted, I asked for a Revell Santa Fe set. And the other question is, why would somebody in Maryland model Cajon? I just answered the Santa Fe part. But the reason for that is this locomotive. I was building a layout for my son, who was about 4 years old. I happened to go to a show and I saw this layout and bought it. So I saw this locomotive and bought it. Fortunately, it had been modified so that it would even go around a curve that was 22 inches. It's the best running steam locomotive that I have. It's the first one that I put sound into. It's the first brass engine I had. That's another photo of it. My layout is in the attic. When I moved into this house, I didn't know what I was going to do. The basement was finished. But one of my neighbors pointed out that somebody had a layout in their attic. And I realized that having insulated my attic, that my attic was gigantic. We had a high-pitched roof, and I knew there were plenty of big rooms up there. So in '93, I started finishing the room. It took about 3 years, actually, because I had to put the floor in and beams on the side to support the floor because there were only 2x6 joists. And then over the years, I added 2008, I did the 50-foot room, which is the vertical room here. And then in 2010, I did an extension of 16 feet here where we were changing our bedroom. And I asked for an extra 8 feet, which got my wife a sitting room, but got me the 16 feet that I really needed for an approach to the Roundhouse. So I have a lot of room here. I basically put this room together before I connected it to the 56-foot room. The layout climbs from 55 inches off the floor to 78 inches, and it provides the 2.2% grade that was typical of Santa Fe on the left-hand track and close to the 3% grade on the other track. There's a ramp into the Cajon Summit room that raises the floor 10 inches. However, it's still advantageous to be 6 feet tall. Staging is located under Summit. I have Digitrax controllers with radio controls, PSX circuit breakers and reversers. The track is code 83 on the main, and it's code 70 on the sidings and in some of the yard. Roughly 130 turnouts, and some of the turnouts are Shinohara. The year I'm modeling is 1950. The benchwork is mostly L girder, but I decided at one point to start using the wall because it allowed me to get rid of a lot of the diagonals that made working under it difficult, and it really was much more solid. And since it's an attic room, the wall is not particularly, it's not sheetrock, it's just paneling. So I'm showing here that most of my controls are manual. You can see over on the right, I have these toggles that are recessed in there, and I've got 049 piano wire that goes up and acts pretty much like a tortoise does. The actuation is done through these toggle switches, which hold the turnout in place, and they also switch the points. And I used a double pole so that if I wanted to add lights, I could do that. I have not done that. These are collars I got from MasterCar, and basically you have to set it so the throw is right by the collars. Slightly more difficult than using tortoises, but a lot cheaper, about $5 per turnout versus $15 to $20 per turnout. Here you can see the staging yard. I have 11 tracks of staging with 2 short tracks here for locomotives. Here are the trains that I modeled. I don't try to run everything in the world, and really operations is not the main point of this layout. The main point is modeling for me. This is my GFX train coming out of the B yard going to the stage, something that prototypically these cars would not be doing. They'd be taken apart in the A yard. The reefers, though, were Andy Bernardino's reefers, and Bill Vandermeer weathered them for me. So it's a special train. This is the B yard looking northwest. There were 19 chutes in reality there. I have modeled about 12 of them. There were pens on the left here that went way back. There's giant stockyard there. I had to compress it, of course. Here's a view of the icing dock and the icing shed and the pre-cooler. During the pandemic, I decided that just having the mains run through this part of the B yard was not great. I had the plans for the pre-cooler, the shed, and the icing dock. So I started building. This is a close-up. You've probably seen this in Bill Messicar's layout before. This is the icing shed, and basically this platform here was a plenum that provided air to these tubes so they could pre-cool the reefers. Here's a view of the icing dock, and you can see the detail, which is pretty much hidden by the cars I have being loaded in front of it. And here's another view showing a little bit more of the pre-cooler. Another view of the pre-cooler, and this model, which is what is referred to generally as a swamp cooler, was something I had no clue how to build. But John Thompson put me in touch with David Biggie, who's in Wyoming, I think, who had come up with a way of doing this just using grooved evergreen styrene as a guide. David did it in all styrene. I knew that I couldn't probably weather styrene as well as he had, so I did it in wood, using only the styrene for the backing. And this is a view looking down the B yard where you can see the pre-cooler and everything. This is probably the most complete thing on my layout right now. I've got even the PE where it crossed the B yard. This is a model of the UP engine yard and the UP engine house that were built during the war when Santa Fe didn't have enough room to share with UP anymore in the Roundhouse. So UP built this structure. This was built totally from photos. We didn't have any plans for it, but this was my rendering from photos. Now we moved around to the A yard, and this is the freight house, which was I kit bashed out of 2 Walthers kits, which were prototypical. Here's the Roundhouse, and this is really the first structure that I started building because Stan Seeds in Florida, he sent me the jigs to build the frames. So I built the Roundhouse. I actually built Don Borden 35 stalls. This one's only 28 because I don't have the depth. And I got around to weathering it. And I also built the turntable out of a diamond scale pony truss kit. And I've just installed the New York Rail Supply indexing, which has been in the box for years and works very, very well. Could recommend it. Here you can see the loco shops on the right of the Roundhouse. These were built by Right on Track Models in Florida. These have so many millions that I decided that I really couldn't beat a laser cutter. So I had them build these structures, and they did a nice job of it. I'm going to work on the interiors. I put mirrors in the back because these loco buildings were actually 20 stalls deep, not 6. So I'm going to pose some locomotives in there. There's enough windows so you can see some things. This is the San Bernardino depot, which I'm sure many of you have seen. This was built by Bob Parcell in Hemet, California. He's the owner of the hobby shop there, and it was through Gary Kane. Gary Kane had him build one and then started marketing these. Mine was the 13th one I think he built. It took 2 years. I think he was sort of at the end of his rope in building these, but he did a very nice job. I had originally intended to build it. Stan Seeds actually even sent me some molds, but I looked at it and decided my layout was big, my time was short, and it might be smarter to buy it. Here you can see another view with the San Bernardino loco and the superintendent's car. This is the model of the passenger car shop. There were actually like a couple buildings like this in the yard. And again, it was a brick building, somewhat difficult to model, but quite easy with a laser cutter. And Right on Track Models also built this. This is the Fifth Street Tower. This was the first model I had Right on Track build because Don Borden and another member of the East Coast group had all bought this model from somebody else, and they couldn't deliver due to family issues. And we already had the brass bridges, and so I had 3 of these built for each of us. This is a model of the bunkhouse at Lower Keenbrook. And this was a kit from Right on Track Models that Don Borden did the drawings for, and then had Right on Track Models build. This is not a standard Santa Fe bunkhouse. It is a 10-room bunkhouse, but unlike the standard, it has a breezeway in the middle here, which the standard ones do not have. The one at Summit was the same. And from the building records, we can see the lengths to know that at the different Vertimont, Keenbrook, and Cajon all had the same shape as Summit. Here's a partially scenic view of Blue Cut. And interestingly, the backdrop here I actually got from Google Earth by asking for Blue Cut. And a friend of mine photoshopped out things like the Southern Pacific line and gave me the actual backdrop. The signal bridge is a kit bash of the BLMA bridge. It's no longer available. I found it online. Once in a while, you can find one of those. This is a Swarthout Canyon Road, which is an area I had a good photo of, and this is Cajon Creek cutting into it with Blue Cut to the left, which is relatively prototypical, although way compressed. This is the first bridge approaching Cajon Station. I recently just started doing the topography back on this. I use Sculptamold. I use, this is rosin paper. This is a method that Howard Zane has published in his book. And Howard is in the area over in Columbia. And anybody who's been to see that knows what a beautiful layout he has. The way this works is you build the cardboard matrix out of cardboard with hot glue, and then coat one side of these pieces of roughly 4 by 5 or so strips with glue and fasten it to the cardboard, let it dry, and then apply another layer over it, and then sculpt the mold, or Howard's used plaster. He said he's just thrown plaster against it and it will stick. I adopted this because I found it to be the nicest method. This backdrop here is actually a photo that I took when I was out in California, in the area near Cajon Station. This is another view of that bridge. This is the one that, if I didn't have the backdrop, I might be able to fool people. This is the next bridge toward Cajon Station. All of the bridges were built using the building records and photos that I got from Otto Cotil, who has been a wealth of information on photos. When I have a question, I generally ask Otto if he has a photo, and generally comes up with something that's a great help. This is further up. This is where, after Cajon Station, the track splits, the left-hand side being the 2.2% grade and the right-hand side being the 3% downhill grade. You can see my benchwork here. Cajon Creek is going to go under the bridges that are closest to us. This is Al Ray. Actually, this is sort of Al Ray and Gish combined, because I didn't have the width to put the bridges where I needed. This bridge would actually be a mile or more to the left, but I did the same thing I think that Ted York did, and that is to run the 2 bridges together. We do what we can with the room we have. It's a close-up of it. Here's the tunnel number 2. For a long time, I wondered what this looked like. And of course, this was quite a distance from tunnel 2, actually. But this is Big Cut. And in all the books, you see Big Cut, and it's often called Terrace Cut, and there are pictures of terracing and stuff. But I think it was 1922, there was a big slide that did away with all the terracing. And so Big Cut looked differently, but most of the books don't have a picture. I never found a picture, but I found a video. I think John Thompson put us onto the video in our Cajon at Groups IO group. And I started looking at the video, and there was a 484 coming down this track. So I asked John, I think it was, I posted and asked John if this was Big Cut, and the answer was yes. So the next question was, what does Big Cut look like coming from the other direction? And so I asked Otto that question. He sent me a photo taken from an F unit going down there, showing what Big Cut looked like from the other direction. You're now entering the approach to Summit. These are mountains. If you look at some of the photos looking down Summit, you can see mountains like this in the distance. I got a hold of a photo online from a photographer, I think, and had a backdrop printed. This is my Summit now. Don Borden helped me do the foam work. I decided I don't like foam. It's too messy for me, but we've got a rough in there, and I will sculpt the mold over that and probably take out the foam here. You can see the kit buildings that have been built. And this is a model Descanso that one of our Cajon at Groups.io members did on Shapeways, made a beautiful model. Lessons learned. I learned trading your skills at distance could be done. I exchanged with Bill Vandermeer. He painted and weathered a lot of my locomotives and some of the rolling stock. And I put sound in his locos for him. Very enjoyable, and I got a lot of very nice locomotives out of that. The internet allows access to fellow modelers. I got into the Cajon group with John Thompson as list owner, and it's been great help. People there who are modeling the same thing. When modeling the prototype, you must plan for structures before laying track. If you don't, you'll probably be disappointed, because I did that in the B yard. I actually built the structures, and then I laid the track. On a large layout, when you don't have help, contracting for things such as structures may make sense. I gave this up sort of unwillingly, because one of the things I like best is building structures. But when I looked at the size of the layout, I realized I'd never get anywhere if I tried to build all these big structures. That depot that has 250 doors and windows. The other thing I know is, as a past neighbor said, the point is not to finish, but to have something to work on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. That was a great presentation of your layout. How long have you been working on this layout in terms of years?
It was 93 that I finished the first 40 by 12 room.
Okay.
Been a long time. It's gone a little faster since I retired about 14 years ago. But the great thing about model railroading is I can close up the attic and leave it and go do what my wife wants to do, or whatever my kids are doing, or whatever. And so I don't put that much time into it, really. If I have the time, I work on it, but otherwise it's there. One thing I didn't mention is operations. I really haven't gotten into operations. I don't have a great nearby crew. Most of my Santa Fe friends are at least an hour and a half to 3 hours. That's only 2 of them, I think, and everyone else is spread out. My grandchildren, though, I have one young grandchild who absolutely loves it. I put stools around so that he could see, Well, that wasn't satisfactory. He took a stool and dragged it so he could stay right with his train. And I have a couple of young men who are sons of somebody I worked with come over, and they run up to 7 trains at once.
I see a question that's shown up in the chat box here, and that is, what do you use for your low shrubs and bushes on your scenery? This is from Alex Brickoff.
That's a good question. That's probably my weakest point. I've been buying a number of things from Scenic Express. There's a lot of stuff produced by the Germans, but there's a dearth of stuff really for Western modelers, I think. We've talked to Scenic Express about it. The East Coast group, Don and I have talked to him about that. And he's come out with some things that are that blue-green that you want on some of the low things. So the Scenic Express site is a place to look for stuff like that. But it is a challenge. It's a challenge to make trees. I mean, John Harrison has made the best trees that I've ever seen. And so I'm trying to look at trees like that. I have some of the things the things you saw at Swarthout Canyon are outdoor plants that I have put some ground foam on. but they aren't really quite the shape of some of the Western trees. And it's very difficult now because the hobby shops don't carry anything. Scenic Express doesn't come to a local show, and there's no big vendor there selling this kind of stuff. So you end up buying something and then finding, well, I didn't really like that.
Another question I had was like your roundhouse with just massive structure. Did you build that kind of in your shop and then move it up there on particle board or something? Or
I built
because, yeah.
it's modular, okay? It comes
Okay.
apart. It's in pieces. It's way too big to move in one piece. I'm building hatches on each side of it so that you'll have access to it. They'll have to be drop-down hatches because the rafter roof creates a problem. You can't go straight up. The other problem the rafter roof creates is backdrops are very limited. I mean, you could have a really wonderful backdrop at San Bernardino, but not with a rafter roof.
I did notice that with the slope ceiling, you've done a nice job of mitigating the shadows in a certain sense with just your blue. I mean, it doesn't really detract at all. It looks good.
Basically, they're all LED shop lights with diffusers under them. There's the lighting that's up there now. Must be 50 shop lights.
I saw the diffusers. They must help a lot to kind of spread the light and avoid, the spotlight effect on the sloping roof.
Yeah, I've done backlighting of things like behind Tunnel 2, there's backlighting now because the lighting didn't look right. It was too dark back there. So I backlit it with LEDs. And the same thing behind the shed at San Bernardino. Not quite as successful as the other one, but same try.
I think the LED lights that are available now and the fact that you can adjust their intensity really helps that sort of thing. So it's a good tool for a layout like this.
Well, heat is a problem up there too. I mean, the heat was another reason to do it because the fluorescence generated a incredible amount of heat. I had fans to exhaust the lights, but even so.
You mentioned shapeways a couple of times here, and I wonder if you do your own design and have them printed, or do you buy kit? And if so, how do you find the right kit among they have tens of thousands of kits up there?
Yeah, no, I haven't done any myself, but I didn't mention it, but and the UP engine house, that water tank is from Shapeways too. If you search out there, you can find lots of parts that have been done. I've just been buying things that other people have already designed.
The layout looks fantastic, so I really hope you can come with some plan for operations. I know you have minimal crew, but to see that operated properly would be absolutely outstanding. So it's a bit of a long way to come, right? You're in Annapolis or north of Annapolis. It's a bit distant from Seattle, but I'd love to see that thing running.
If you're ever in the neighborhood, contact me.
Well,
anyway.
you might be surprised by that. I do travel quite a bit.
That would be fine.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll have you running helper operations.
Oh, that sounds risky, but okay, I'd have a go.
Well, what I've done when I've had people in is I will be the switch operator. I handle the crossover from left to right, coming in and out of the yards. So I'll be running from one position to the next, but I really need about 4 people to do that.
Yeah.
If you're running, many trains.
In one of your yards, you had plywood, you had your benchwork, then your plywood, and then I think 1-inch styrofoam.
Most of the layout is the yards are 1/2-inch plywood with 1/2-inch homosode on the top. With the foam you saw in the A yard from the west, there's going to be a lumber yard, an oil company, and then the sand house and those things. And since I'm not going to have active turnouts back there probably, so I'm using 1-inch foam because it's easier and it'll be easier for the hatches.
Yeah. So you do use homosode mostly.
Yes, and if you're looking at the track at Cajon going up to Sullivan's Curve, that is spline with 1/2-inch homosode on top, where the homosode has been cut to roadbed outside.
Yeah,
creating a large pile of dust.
The track that comes up to Summit and then continues east, that goes into a staging. How is that staging arranged?
There's no staging there, unfortunately. It goes into a return loop at the end of Summit, which is actually over your head at the beginning of the entry into Cajon. And
Okay.
what I've used there is I've used 1-inch square aluminum bars that you can get at Home Depot in order to cut down on the clearance so that you can walk under it.
You had listed a number of trains that you run. Do you have all those trains available to run now, or is that sort of a future list of things you're putting together for operation?
All of those trains are available to run. Some of them are in boxes at my feet right now because they interfere with working on the layout. I don't have all the passenger trains up there yet. I have the staging yard pretty full. I'm getting close to probably moving more of the freights out of there. The thing is, I found like when I got the Walthers Super Chief set, you've got to work in those cars quite a while before they run right. So
Yes.
I've got a Cola in the box here, Grand Canyon, and a El Capitan.
Oh, your San Bernardino station's going to be a happening place.
Is there just a single track return loop at Summit? And how can you operate the layout if the train has to disappear and then reappear immediately going the other way?
That's the drawback. Yeah, I didn't have a good solution for that. So I had to just put a large return loop there. And, I have to use the sidings.
Is there more than one track in the return loop?
No, that was hard enough to build because I built it low and then elevated it. I just went to be simple there. I would like to have Victorville, John. I think I said that before you came on. But I have to leave that to you. I couldn't figure out a way to get Victorville. I don't have the room for a helix there. I thought about it, but the problem was the 13-foot width room is not wide enough for that, particularly with the rafters.
Okay, thanks.
On your backdrop, when you were showing the bridge near Cajon Station, it looked like you might have used multi-layers of flat photographs, perhaps, to build up the mountain backdrop there, or maybe I misinterpreted how that was constructed, but it looked really nice.
Well, it's a single photo backdrop, but you come around the curve there, and what I've done is I brought a hill in to try to meet the backdrop, and it will be sculptamold over that hill. I've just actually started filling in the creek, and the creek is more vertical than I'd like to have it, but there's really no choice given where the wall is there. I actually moved a wall in and created a backdrop that was vertical at that point to get away from the rafter wall and to house the curve anyway. So I would probably try to use vegetation there to make it blend in. That's a big part of the challenge, really.
What's the widest dimension on your layout? And are the turnouts for uncoupling cars and whatever, are you going to use magnets or picks or?
No, all uncouplings are going to have to be with picks. Yeah.
So is the distance quite wide? Look, as I recall, one of them is quite long reaches.
The A yard is very wide. You won't be able to reach the rearmost tracks, but most of the operations, most of the way people run a Cajon layout was helpers. The real challenge will be coming out of the Roundhouse and working your way over to the B yard, because as I understand it, all helpers, both UP and Santa Fe, were added in the B yard. So you've got to come out of there. You've got to negotiate. There's a short way and a long way, which on my layout aren't all that different, to get over to the B yard. And you've got to be headed in the right direction when you get to the B yard. At some point, the locos had to back down some distance because there's no Y at the other end of the lower end of the B yard. There's a Y in between the A and the B yard where the San Bernardino loco could turn. And I've designed it so that my San Bernardino loco can turn there. But that's the last place you have a chance to turn your locomotive.
Mike, what is the minimum radius on your main lines?
36 inches with easement. Passenger cars and locomotives with long straight frames that seem to be the limiting factor, the 484s.
We want to thank Mike for putting this presentation together. It was fantastic. We really enjoy, I would say, having people from other parts of the country and modeling things other than things found in the Pacific Northwest. So This was a great presentation, great layout tour.
So thanks, Mike, and thanks,
Thanks,
Lee.
Mike.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Good
Mike.
job.
Thanks, Mike.
Great job.
Thank you.
Have
Nice
a good
presentation.
night.